Hey guys, this is Caroline and Sasha from Code You Australia, and we're here to discuss an article that was recently written by The Guardian. The Guardian is an Australian newspaper, and this article was actually sent in by one of the local Australian graduates who's following and supporting us, which is amazing that an Australian medical graduate is following Code You Australia and supporting us.
Yep,
firstly.
so supportive. It's amazing.
And the article's title is International Doctors Unable to Work in Australia Due to Broken System. Experts, plural, say. And this is written by Sarah Martin.
Yeah, so just a brief overview of what this article is about. It's basically, if you, in a nutshell, talking about international doctors that are trying to get into the Australian workforce, and they're concentrating a lot on the registration process, which is a grueling process. We all know it. It takes very long. And they're basically making the point that the registration process is delaying people from overseas entering the workforce. And this is what's, breaking the healthcare system. And, this is the only thing that's really the problem. And if we could speed up registration, I suppose this would fill this gap and this problem would no longer be there.
Mm-hmm. That's an exact summary.
Yep.
That's really good. Firstly, before we get into it, I just want to thank The Guardian for writing this, because we need to talk about IMGs more, and we don't really speak about them, especially through the media.
Yeah, it's great to actually see like the word international doctors in an Australian published article in a newspaper.
Yes, agree.
Yep.
But secondly, I want to know from you, Sasha. We read this together not too long ago. What were your first feelings as an IMG reading this?
Yep. So going through it initially, I can see that it's full of facts and things that are not changeable. But the way it's put there is quite negative. It does make it seem more like this massive mountain that you have to climb to actually just get your foot in the door in Australia, which I suppose in a lot of ways it is. But it's just sort of droning on about these processes and how long they are and how this is the huge problem. And as a foreign doctor, it's different now because I'm here and I've done it. But, retrospectively, if I was reading this in another country, I would really feel, this is a huge hurdle to have to overcome. And this is just registration. Never mind anything else. This is just the registration part. So, yeah, not great overall. Yeah. What about you?
I have to agree with you. If I put myself back a couple of years ago where I was an IMG, I had put so much money into my exams, into bridging courses, and I read an article like this, you naturally every day are anxious about your future. And then you see an article like this that says experts say, and you're like, what am I doing with my life? You would feel horrible. And I did. And so this kind of takes me back. All those years ago. It makes me feel horrible.
It's a little uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Yes, exactly. But now that I'm on the other end, I read this and I'm like, okay, it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's a hurdle, not a mountain, really.
Yes. And that's why I think it was really important that we jumped on this podcast and had this conversation and go through, the paragraphs of this article with our followers and other IMGs out there.
Yeah.
And really give them our experience and our thoughts on this article.
Yeah. And this article, this has made its rounds on Facebook. It's been on multiple sort of international IMG groups. So a lot of people are reading this in other countries and thinking, oh gosh, this registration process is impossible.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So saying all that, let's get started. So the first paragraph says, hundreds of foreign trained doctors living in Australia have been unable to work due to what critics say is a broken system, amid calls for the process to be improved to help address chronic workforce shortages in the health sector. The Health Minister, Mark Butler, has flagged his concerns about the registration for international medical graduates, saying he has sought advice on how to speed up registration for doctors already in the country. So...
Yep. Well, first of all, in the first paragraph, they're talking about IMGs here in Australia that are waiting for registration. Most people that are trying to get into the country are not in the country yet. people are doing these processes from overseas, all over the world.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's true. It is really difficult for people that are already here trying to get a job. But I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have the means to be here and just wait for this to happen. People are working in their other countries. I mean, that's what I did.
Yes.
I wasn't here before I was sorted.
Yeah. So all we can say from those paragraphs is that they're missing another sector of the population
a huge
of IMGs.
sector.
Yep. So the next paragraph says the Australian Medical Association, the AMA President Omar Khoshid, said the process for IMG registration in Australia was complex and different issues applied depending on whether a doctor was a specialist or a junior doctor. What do you think about that?
Yep. So the process is obviously different. These are all just facts.
They are.
These are 100% just facts. Everyone knows the standard pathway is different to the specialist pathway. I don't know really what to say about this. This is just a blatant fact.
Yep.
That you can get from any website.
That's right. It's not anything
insightful.
negative. It's just facts. Okay. So there is no doubt there are people who are in that system who are struggling, Khoshid said. So the next thing he says is there is no doubt there are people who are in the system who are struggling. He said in many instances, doctors who had been working with limited registration but were unable to meet various regulatory requirements would be forced to cease practice or in some cases leave the country. So what he's saying are two things. The people that are currently trying to get registration, so they've gotten a job, they're trying to get registration, they haven't actually stepped foot into working yet, are struggling in that system. And then he's saying the people that finally get their foot in the door and say they've got limited or provisional registration and they're trying to get general registration are struggling in that system to the point that they might not be meeting AHPRA's requirements to get their general registration, so that eventually they have to resign and leave the country potentially.
And that's in the allocated time. Like I said to you before, when you've got limited registration, you've actually got only a couple of years, I think it's 2 or 3 years, to actually formalize that limited registration into general registration.
Yeah.
So when I read this, that paragraph, it's just a perfect example of IMG doctors that are coming into the workforce on limited registration that are not thriving enough to actually convert that limited registration into general registration, because those few years, those early years that they come into the system, they are struggling. They are struggling. They actually can't make it to general registration, which is a huge, a second hurdle, you know. Getting limited registration is the first one. Converting that to general is the second hurdle. And people are just not making it there.
No. And that's the thing, like, to say people are struggling in the system, which is, he's talking about the ones that are trying to get registration, like on the long wait time of AHPRA to get limited registration so they can work. I think we need to acknowledge and really put it out there that the ones that are actually truly struggling are the ones actually working, and they're not thriving.
100%.
And that's why they're probably not making general registration. And that's actually a whole nother issue that isn't got anything to do with AHPRA. That's not because they didn't submit the right paperwork.
Yeah.
It's actually due to the fact that the healthcare system is broken in a whole nother area where we don't really support and onboard IMGs well. And that's something we're going to actually talk about a little bit later. And it's kind of one of the reasons we've done Code U Australia, because that is the real fundamental issue here.
Yep.
But just wanted to point that out now.
Yep.
So the next paragraph is, no one has put enough attention on this, and despite it being raised with the health department and the minister by us over the last year or so, we haven't seen any change, he said. And now that we are in this desperate situation, it just seems so silly.
Yeah, so here they're talking about how to make this process faster. They've obviously looked into it. They've tried to discuss options to make it faster. I think this is a time limited process because it is so difficult to actually assess doctors, to assess their skills and to assess the competency of people that are dealing with other people's lives. I think it's always going to be a lengthy process.
Yes.
I don't think, I think AHPRA could probably neaten it up a bit and maybe push it a bit so that they could make it shorter. But I don't I don't see that it's going to go from, 6 months to what it is now to 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
I just think the nature of the work and the skills that they have to assess is something that is a lengthy process, and I kind of agree why.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with you. Like any business, small business, large business, corporate business, yes, you can sharpen up your processes. You can be a bit more efficient. But the reality is, if you think AHPRA can reduce their processing time, I mean, I don't agree with that. I'm actually on AHPRA's side here.
Oh, me too.
I think what they're doing, like you said, it's just got so much weight that if they messed it up, it wouldn't be good. And let me tell you a story. Several years ago, there was a IMG doctor that was working for quite a few years in an Australian public hospital, and it turned out the person wasn't even a doctor. Somehow, some false documents got through AHPRA, through the certification, and this person got registration. The media had an absolute field day.
Yeah.
The public with their comments like, how did this person get through? This is ridiculous. So AHPRA has to answer to its stakeholders. And while, yes, the hospital on one side is a stakeholder, at the end of the day, if a doctor who's an IMG who isn't really a doctor working, the hospital's not going to get scrutinized, because the hospital's going to say, well, the documents went through
we asked AHPRA.
and AHPRA approved it. So the hospital's not going to answer for it. It's AHPRA. So obviously they're going to have to do this process.
Do you blame them?
I do not.
Yeah, I do. I do not. I think this is a lengthy process. If I had the job of assessing someone to say if they were a good enough doctor to have people's lives in their hands,
yes,
I would take 6 months.
Yes.
To a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's factor in, I mean, they've also been hit by COVID. So their employees who pick up these applications, they might be down X amount of employees, just the way in the hospital we're down X amount of employees every day due to COVID and sickness. So naturally, I would expect that their processing time would be delayed in the last 24 months due to the pandemic.
Yep.
So reasonable. Yep. Okay. The other thing though, which a lot of hospitals don't know about, and I just found this out recently myself, is that, you can actually start the process for an IMG, their registration process, even without offering them a contract. So let me give you an example. Let's say you do not have a contract for this IMG at this point in time, but you know that in about 3 months' time, due to this time of year where it's resignations, it's promotions, junior doctors are going to become registrars, so junior doctor positions will open. You can actually sort of offer a doctor, an IMG, the intention of employment and start the paperwork today.
Yep.
So that means like if you start the paperwork today, in 3 months' time, the position becomes available. You then offer them a formal contract. Their paperwork has already been with AHPRA for 3 months.
Yeah, you've cut 3 months off the time.
Exactly. And then just another 3 months go by and they're ready to start work. So instead of a hospital waiting 6 months, it can wait 3 months.
I'm pretty sure none of the hospitals do this or know this.
No, found out through a different way. And we're like, how have we not known this? So I don't know. That means all these other hospitals that are heavily reliant on IMGs might not know this.
Yeah.
So if anyone's from AHPRA and listening to our podcast, we need to get somebody on, because I bet you have a whole other bunch of tips that you can provide to not just IMGs to help make the process smoother, but the hospitals as well. So yeah, anyone from AHPRA, please.
Yeah, we know how hard it must be to assess these things, but there must be processes that make it a bit smoother.
Yeah, and we just need that
more streamlined.
We need transparency. So we need to have, information out there. So please get in contact with us. We'd love to have
great.
A session, a podcast session with you guys. Because I bet you if we got the right information out there, not only help hospitals, it would help the IMGs, but then it would also help the AHPRA employees. If they're dealing with less general inquiries, because the right information is already out there and it's accessible, then overall their practices would be more efficient as well.
Such a good point.
It is. So, it's like one hand washes the other, is that saying?
2 birds, 1 stone.
Exactly. In the next paragraph, they mention that a Spanish-trained doctor, Paula Garcia, so another IMG, told Guardian Australia she had been frustrated by the registration process in Australia after she was unable to gain registration despite having a job offer at the Prince Alfred Hospital in her specialist field of fetal ultrasound.
No, that's a bit different, Cara. That's the specialist pathway.
Yes.
That's not the standard pathway.
Yep.
Everyone knows the specialist pathway has its own problems. It's very, very difficult. It's very hard to navigate. But that's not talking to most of the people that this article concerns.
No.
Most 90% of people, I would say, take the standard pathway. I mean, there's even specialists that are taking the standard pathway because the specialist pathway is so complex.
Yes, that's
so.
right.
It's a good point, but I
Yes.
don't think it's really addressing the bulk of the people involved.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that it's still a valid point. But see, if someone who hasn't gone through the process myself and I had read that, I would have thought it was applying to me who was trying to go down the standard pathway. So that's a really important point. We want our IMG followers to know that this is the specialist pathway, not the standard pathway.
Yeah.
Okay. The next paragraph is for some other countries which have to go through a different process, that even take longer and it costs a lot of money. So it's really a bit of a barrier. And right now we need to be looking at streamlining red tape, not making more, she said.
Yeah, I think this is referring to the AMCs, is it not? Like the fact that this is not the only pathway that they have to spend a lot of money doing other things. Is that what they're saying?
Yes, I think
so. I tend to agree with that. I think AMCs are very costly for IMGs. I think the whole process itself is very costly.
Yes.
Not only in money, time, everything. So I tend to agree with that statement. I feel, while it is also I'm sure very costly to set up all these exams and things all over the world, I do feel that it could be possibly the cost could be cut somewhat.
Yeah, I think
It's difficult.
I get every institution has its expenses, but the cost is really high for a lot of these things, and you're not factoring in that you do need IMGs. They do make quite a significant number of your workforce. They come here giving up everything, taking any other job, not in their field, just to save every cent they've got to sit these exams, sit these English exams, sit these bridging courses, even sit observerships, which are so expensive as well.
Yeah.
Not sure where you think they're getting the money, but if you need them, then we need to sort of meet people halfway and make it financially easier for them to sit these exams so that they can register, so we can onboard them.
Yep. And I think the paragraph, what it's trying to say is that the money is a problem and the registration is just more red tape.
Yes.
But I think, instead of saying, the money's a problem, the registration is red tape, let's fix the registration. What about all the steps before registration, like the money that they're mentioning, that can be slightly adjusted to make the process a little easier as well. At every level, it should actually be adjusted.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Then they say AHPRA, which is responsible for registration and accreditation in Australia, said it's managing 1,594 open applications for registrations from IMGs.
That is huge. As someone, as both of us have applied for limited registration through AHPRA, and that is a huge amount of paperwork that they have. So, the processing times are huge. And on top of it, they have a lot of paperwork and backlog and, COVID as well, like you mentioned. That's a huge amount.
Yep.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I get where they're coming from. But at this point, I think it's probably important to mention that even if those 1,594 applicants were processed today and get put into the workforce tomorrow, how functional are they really in the workforce? Because, that's not the main problem.
No, it's not.
Making registration sort of a faster process is really good in an ideal world. I think it is helpful. But another facet is, what do they do when they get into those posts?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of with AHPRA.
I agree with them as well. They actually go further to say that 75% of applications received are initially incomplete, usually because of missing information, including identity documents, correct certification and translation documents, employment information, and certificates of good standing from other regulatory authorities.
Yeah, and this this touches on what we said earlier about all these sort of small processes that AHPRA has that can streamline the process that people don't know about, that aren't transparent enough. There's not enough information about it. I know personally, when I was going through this process, I found an old post, and I'm talking old, on Facebook, like from 2010 earliest, where someone had mentioned that the process of the registration is so difficult, and if you line up all your paperwork correctly, that makes a huge difference to how fast they process it. So for instance, putting through a half job, as in half your documents are missing or incorrect, and they have to give it back to you, you correct it, give it back to them, then there's another mistake, it goes back and forth. A lot of the times these back and forths are happening via post, from international post, so this delays it by weeks.
Yes.
For us, particularly, coming from South Africa, our postal service is just not the greatest. So not only is it expensive to go back and forth, but it just takes ages to get anything from South Africa to Australia. So I made sure I was only going to do that once.
Yes.
After reading that comment. And I had every single document in order, how it should be. I had asked multiple people from the hospital that I was going to if the documents were okay. If I wasn't sure if anything was valid, I would make sure that I'd ask someone, because that back and forth just it can add months onto the process.
Yep.
And not a lot of people get told that.
I've never heard that.
It's a simple fix.
It makes complete sense now that you're saying it. And this is the thing. Why haven't we heard that before?
Why is it just a little anecdotal thing that's on Facebook? I mean, that should be broadcasted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is another reason why we need someone from AHPRA to get on this podcast and give these really insightful tips. Not just to help the IMG, but to help your own, your own company to do things more efficiently.
I mean, your own workforce to process documents a lot faster if everything's in order exactly as it should be, correct the first time.
Exactly. Agreed. Then the next paragraph says, a spokesperson for the Department of Health said it was looking into the issue. In response to concerns raised by the AMA on the issue, the department has been in discussions with the AMA, the board, which is the medical board, and the AMC, the Australian Medical Council, to examine the barriers experienced by this group of IMGs and to identify opportunities to improve the system while maintaining quality and safety measures within registration requirements.
Yeah.
Something's missing from that.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So
the Department of Health has something to say. They have a lot of spokespeople.
Yeah, so they've got the AMA as one of their stakeholders. They've got the AMC. They've got the medical board.
All experts.
But I think they're missing a huge stakeholder in this.
I think they're missing the actual IMG.
Yeah.
Like the actual person that they're representing.
And this is actually quite a classic fail in the healthcare system, that all these decisions and ideas and advisory groups and thought process happen without the actual person
without someone that's lived through it.
Exactly, the actual real stakeholder. So Department of Health, if you need someone on your advisory group or need information from actual real IMGs who've experienced it,
here we are,
Code U Australia.
Like, follow, subscribe.
Exactly. We are here to help. We can tell you the process. So that's really important though. Like, all jokes aside, it's actually really important in anything that you do that is directed at IMGs is that you involve IMGs. It's very important.
100%. And what we were chatting about before, Cara, is so true. The fact that IMGs don't get involved in these things is because we're busy treading water.
Yes.
We've already jumped through so many hurdles to get here. Spent tons of money.
Yes.
You arrive here, you are just completely exhausted financially, emotionally, overwhelmed with a new country and new systems that you aren't prepared for. And you forget about all those people on Facebook that helped you.
Yes.
You forget about you forget that you've left people at home that are also struggling in the same processes as you.
Yeah.
And that there's thousands of doctors trying to get to Australia that haven't been as fortunate or as lucky as you to have the process have come to fruition.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
You are already behind. You've left your whole career from your previous country to come here. And you just can't focus on anything else but moving yourself forward.
I agree with that. It is so difficult because once you're in the system And you actually think that once you get your foot in the door and you're in the system, your problems go away. And it's so not true. You just get a whole bunch of new problems. And in those new problems, you're just trying to survive the workforce.
Yeah.
And that you do forget about everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's just, you're just in survival mode. That's what it is. It's not a lack of, consideration or you don't care. It's just that you're just trying to keep your head above water at all times.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that with this article, while it's bringing up really good points and bringing awareness to the IMG issues, I suppose, it's just missing a whole facet.
yes.
Like it's talking about registration
Yes.
as being this huge barrier. And don't get me wrong, it is.
Yeah.
It's a huge barrier. We all sit and wait for it for months.
Mm-hmm.
But what about when you've broken that barrier? What about all the barriers that are lined up for you when you get into the job?
Yeah.
Like, what about all these new systems that you have to now suddenly function in? Once you get your registration, you're not suddenly immediately just a functional doctor overnight.
Absolutely. You're just not. You're not.
Getting AHPRA registration doesn't make you a safe Australian doctor.
Yeah.
So that's just the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Getting your registration is just the start. You get forced into this workforce, often not orientated properly, not to the fault of the healthcare system that's already quite overburdened. They just don't have funding, I suppose, to give IMGs exactly what they need to thrive from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it usually takes you a couple of months to find your feet, if you're lucky.
Yeah. So let's really break this down here, because we're talking from experience, but let's explain to the people that haven't worked yet what it's really like. So the first thing this article is saying, which you did mention, is they're talking about the broken system and registration really contributing to that. But the reality is that registration is one small area of all this. The reality of the broken system is even if you had 100 spots to fill and you're 100 doctors short and you need 100 doctors now, not in 6 months' time due to registration, you need them now. Let's say you fast track them by some miracle. They get in 30 days. Is the system fixed just because you had 100 empty spots and now you've got 100 new staff? So you're no longer short staff. Is the system fixed?
No.
Exactly. But the question is why? So for people that don't know, who haven't got their foot in the door, who haven't experienced, the reason that it's not fixed, because yes, theoretically from a mathematical problem, you had 100 spots, you filled it with 100 doctors, now that equals 0. No more shortages.
No more problem.
No more problem. No shortages, no problems. But it's not a mathematical problem. It's not a numbers problem. The issue is that when you onboard 100 new IMGs, they are not onboarded like any other industry. They don't get time to settle in their role. They don't get orientated. They don't get shown anything. What really happens is, especially in a hospital that's short staffed, they get put in the rotations. They get sent to the team that they're going to go work in, and that team might be down by one doctor. Even if they're not down by one doctor, they go in as an extra. But who's actually teaching them?
Yep, the local grads, the local interns, the junior local doctors. Yeah.
So let's look at these local grads, especially intern. Most interns are 22, 23 years old, unless they've done a previous degree. This is their first job. They are genuinely trying to just find their own feet.
Oh, they're treading water themselves.
100%. And then they get told they've got this brand new IMG who's brand new to the healthcare system on your team. Can you help show them around? And you know that statement is not...
What a loaded statement.
Yeah.
Can you please show them around? Please show around this third world doctor that's never seen a computer in a hospital.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. And it's not even just the IT part. It's the referral system. It is even the equipment. Like, yes, everyone knows how to take bloods and put a cannula in, but the equipment is different here. So when you say to them, do you want to go cannulate this patient? They're like, okay, yeah, I know how to cannulate. So they go into the equipment room and they're like, what am I looking for? What is this? This is all different.
It was like Candyland when I first went into an
like,
equipment room here.
Exactly. So many options. Like, what do I do with all this? So it's even little things like that. And then who are they left to go to? It's the interns. It's the junior doctors. So they're the guys that are completely burdened by this. So not only are they short-staffed and burdened, then when you give them new staff and new IMGs, they are then burdened with the responsibility of helping them out.
And it's an unfair responsibility.
100%.
It shouldn't be put on them.
No.
And I mean, not only is it sort of a burden for the local grad, but it's really not embarrassing, but I mean, it feels bad as an IMG to have to go to them time and time again.
Yes.
Because these things take such a long time to sink in.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, like the computer system and the admin system in the healthcare here was completely different to what I was used to. Like we were completely paper-based. We had no sort of digital medical records where I was working. So I had to constantly go to the intern that I was working with, who thankfully was so helpful. I mean, that doesn't even happen. You might not have a helpful junior that's working with you. They were so helpful, but I had to go over and over for the same things. I felt really stupid. I felt the burden that I was being on that person.
Yeah.
You feel like, you can barely function. I mean, if you can't do those simple processes, logging into the systems, working the systems, you can't do anything. You can't see patients. You can't write notes. You can't prescribe.
No.
It's disabling.
So let's be honest, like your mental health, while you're looking for a job, your mental health and your self-esteem are hit really hard. Then you finally get your foot in the door, and the fact that you have to constantly, and you know you're burdening the junior doctor.
Oh, you feel it.
You feel it. You know it. And then you have to do that, and your self-esteem hits again. And like I kind of had a similar experience. So I started 5 months into the year, and that's because a local intern dropped out, resigned. And by the time I got the job, I got AHPRA registration, it was end of May. I got put in the department I was working with another local, and that was it for me. And I was done there. So no orientation. I was brand new to the healthcare system, and I just got really lucky that the intern I had was quite sweet, very understanding, quite mature for her age.
Shout out to the local grads for helping us out. Man, the interns are amazing.
Yeah, they are. But unfortunately, like that story I have isn't, some people don't experience that. They actually get local grads that either say, well, this is not, I don't get paid for this.
Fair.
And fair. Yeah, true. You don't. Or that, the hospital should really be orientating you before like bringing you here.
Again,
true.
fair.
Yeah, fair, true, exactly. Or they get local grads that are just not interested at all because they're struggling themselves. So it's not fair on them. And to be fair, this is why the system is broken. Your registration is honestly a very, very small pin on the map. The real reason it's broken is not necessarily the shortages, but how you onboard your doctors, specifically your IMG doctors, when you're trying to fill those shortages. And let's look at the reasons why. Why don't we onboard properly like any other industry? Okay, we are funded, especially public hospitals, you're funded by government funding. Do you have the money to assign a role to another doctor to help onboard and orientate and train up your new IMGs? The answer is usually no. And if you're a savvy hospital and you found a way to allocate a role to a doctor to do that, let's be honest, who's usually in those roles? Is it local grads or is it IMGs?
No, local grads.
So you have local grads training up IMGs who haven't gone through what they've gone through, who don't know how they think, how they learn, or what even their deficits are. You can tell the local grad what their deficits are, but the best teachers are the ones who teach because they have experienced it.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I was saying to you before when we went through the article, is that it's so easy, like what this article is doing as well, is just listing all these issues and these barriers. It's so easy to do that, and anyone can do that. And I think, the people that are orientating, or the local grads that are orientating IMGs, or that are higher up there that are part of these orientation programs, I think that they do a good job of that. And good for them, that is what they can identify. And it's easy to list all these problems. But I think that why they're missing the point is that they actually can't, understand the solution to these problems if they haven't. It hits home differently when you've experienced the problem.
Yes.
And being an IMG makes you identify those problems, and you've actually had to live through how to solve that. You've had to troubleshoot all of those alone.
Yes.
So I think you see it a bit clearer when it's applicable to you, like with anything.
Yes.
It's easier to list stuff, but it means more when it's applicable to you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's really summarize the issues here. So we have 1, the issue of registration. We have 2, the issue of the cost of the registration and the pathways and everything you have to do. Then we have 3, the wait time of registration. And then 4, we have the issue of onboarding.
Yeah, and can I just mention as well, like onboarding these international doctors, this is 60 or more than 60% of the workforce in most hospitals.
That's a very good point.
Australia's healthcare system is driven by international doctors.
Yep.
Now, the quality of the international doctors, or the readiness to work when they go into the workforce, is so important. It's a huge driving factor in the success of the healthcare system here, because it is taking up most of the healthcare system.
Yep.
So that 60% can't be adding to the burden, which currently I think it sometimes does.
Yes.
It shouldn't be adding. It should be relieving the burden. And that's why, rushing through registration processes just to get people into these roles, it doesn't necessarily lift that burden.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point you make, that, a huge part of the Australian healthcare workforce is driven by IMGs. So that is the investment that the Australian healthcare is making, is by having these
100%.
IMGs. And if you're not onboarding them correctly, and the person who's onboarding them isn't possibly an IMG themselves, then what do you think you're going to get on that return on your investment?
Yeah.
Just a question. Don't need to answer it. Just have a think about it. I mean, this is business 101, right?
Yeah.
So we really need to think about that. So let's think about it in an ideal scenario. What are the fixes here? Because I'm a person, like I always say, and this is what I say to new IMGs, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution.
Cutthroat.
Yeah, no, because you have to apply that to every aspect in the healthcare system. Come to me with a solution. So, or at least a couple of options for the solution. So what would the solutions be here? So 1, let's talk about the registration process.
Yeah. So
what would be the fix there?
Yeah. Well, exactly what the article, I suppose, is droning on about. That it should be shorter, which I agree with. It could probably be shorter.
Yep.
I don't think much shorter. I think it's going to really make a huge impact if it goes from 6 months to 4 months? Not really.
No. What I think they could do is shorter, be more efficient. And by being efficient, they have to be transparent and maybe put the information out there on some tips for IMGs, tips for hospitals to help speed up the process and make it less back and forth.
Yeah.
That's important.
And take the anxiety out of it, really.
Yes.
Huge anxiety around trying to get registration.
Yep.
So, yeah, just in that aspect, streamlining that would probably be better as well.
Yep. And then the second one is, let's look at costs, because maybe the AMC should
Huge
factor
issue.
in, if we want to get more doctors ready to get registration and apply for jobs, they need to get through these exams, maybe look at the cost structure. So that's another solution. The third one is the onboarding, which I personally believe in and I think is the biggest one.
Well, this is why we're doing this. This is our passion.
100%. So this is why we've been wanting to do this for so long, because we have, first of all, we both have additional roles in our hospitals where we support IMGs through, pastoral support, through education, and we gravitated to these roles because I know when I was an intern RMO, if I saw it was a new IMG, I would take them, I would give them all my resources, all my tips, all my knowledge, and hey, if there's anything you need, come to me. I'll try to help you out the best I can.
Because it resonates with you.
100%. I really hate seeing people struggle the way I did. So I try to relieve that as much as I can. So naturally we gravitated to these roles. And we can see such a huge impact we're having in these roles. And we just thought, we need to be doing this on a much bigger scale, because it not just helps IMGs. Let's really think about this and break it down. You help onboard IMGs while they're waiting for registration. You help get them the skills and knowledge and understanding they need to know before going into the hospital. One, it's a personal gain for the IMG, because they will not only try to just survive in their role, they're going to thrive in it.
They will walk into those doors with confidence already.
Yes, they're going to thrive. Then the second one is the local grads, those interns and those residents. They're going to be less burdened in an already overburdened, understaffed and overworked system.
With more time for actual patient care.
Exactly.
Than babying another doctor.
Exactly. And then let's look at medical administration. If you've got IMG doctors who are ready to go, who have been onboarded successfully before they even step foot in there, then you will spend less time and resources supporting them, putting them on performance management or setting up meetings with them to find out why they did X, Y, Z,
Doubling
simple, wrong. Yes, exactly. And doing that over and over and over again. So we're actually saving money, because time is the money. We're saving money from a medical administration point of view. Yep. And then really we're helping overall the healthcare system in Australia. So that's why we did this. It's not just we did this for an IMG. We're doing this for the bigger picture.
Yep.
Really.
And I think while this article, it has good points, it's not this black and white. It's not just this. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much beneath the surface here that they're not even scratching.
Yes, totally agree.
There are so many barriers that we have moving into this healthcare system that's just not addressed. And like I said to you before, I think the reason this is not being addressed is because IMGs are not addressing it.
No.
We're busy trying to catch up all that lost time that we've spent, draining all our time and money into trying to get here. Mm-hmm. And all those years that we were in our, home countries practicing. And
I think we're also embarrassed by the struggle.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
To some point I was like, how much do I let people know that I'm, especially when
I'm not okay.
I'm not okay and I'm struggling, and
they'll think I'm stupid.
They'll think I'm stupid. I feel stupid. And I don't want them to think employing me was a bad idea. So we're embarrassed by the struggle. We don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and a lot of the struggle for me was I would often think to myself in my head, like, Sasha, you've got 4 years experience. You shouldn't be struggling like this. Like, I didn't deserve to struggle because I should know better.
Yes.
So I was really hard on myself about it. And I think that's how a lot of people think.
Oh, yes.
Most people come over with a bit of experience. You don't expect to struggle.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess you struggle because you have no idea what you're walking into.
Absolutely nothing. And if you're not street smart, like a lot of people aren't, let's be honest, like a lot of us doctors, we're just not street smart. We book smart, or we've studied our way, to get to a certain place.
Yeah.
But we don't have street smarts.
Agree. So, I mean, in my case, I can definitely say I'm, compared to other dogs, I'm not book smart. Definitely not. No. But that's what's got me through all this, and actually got me on the other end where I've developed strategies for everything. So I always use my strategies to make sure I look after the patient properly. I don't miscommunicate. I make sure I understand my registrar correctly. I help the registrar by supporting them, by making them very comfortable with me and trusting me through the process of ensuring all the patients are okay on the ward. So I developed these strategies because it's just my street smart.
Yeah, and I think this is also where your Australian background helps you out because the culture, like you know what the registrars want, how they're going to see you and perceive you. When you come from another country, this is just completely foreign.
Agreed.
Like, you have the street smarts, yes, I agree. I would trust you with most life skills.
But it's so true, knowing Australian culture. See, that's the thing, like knowing clinical medicine will only get you so far. You have to understand, and not just understand Australian culture, you then have to learn to apply it. And that's why, like with the IMGs, that I do try to teach them Australian culture and work strategies and how to apply it. And only an IMG can teach that, and no one else, because you have to live it to teach it.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
That's so true. I think that's pretty much a crux of what we do with everything that we have been doing so far, is that we've lived it.
Yes.
Now we need to, pass it on.
Yes. Agree.
And it's really not necessary for people to have to go through as much of a struggle. I mean, it'll never be easy, but it can be 50% easier.
Yes, totally agree with that. Absolutely. Well, look, I love this article. Thank you again to The Guardian for writing it. We need more IMG issue representation. Thank you for our followers for listening. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Code You Australia YouTube channel. Please subscribe, because that's where all this information, all these informative sessions are going up. So we don't want you to miss out on any good videos. Also, just like one of our followers who sent through this article, if you've got anything that you want us to specifically comment on and get our thoughts on, we'd love to do more of this. So send it through.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys.
All right. See you guys.